Welcome to this third episode of Between Generations. This is where we invite both an established and a new voice to discuss, to inspire, and to challenge each other on the different aspects of sustainable transformation. Today, we're going to talk about how to both build and lead a sustainable company. Across the corporate world, we hear desire, we hear a willingness to transform both products and companies into a more sustainable fashion. But what does it actually take to transform your company? How do we do it on a tangible level? And is this transformation going fast enough? This is what we will talk about today. And we have invited two business leaders in with us today. And welcome to both of you. And thank you so much for joining us here at the Tomorrow Studio. Petra Kaukua, you are the CEO and founder of EATGRIM, where you work to minimize food waste. And thank you for joining us today. And Susanne Stormer, you've been working for Novo Nordisk for 20 years now, where you have been the Chief Sustainability Officer and VP. And I actually like to start out with you because we are used to hearing sustainability as a vision, as a dream for our companies. But what does it actually mean when you work to apply sustainability in a big company like Novo Nordisk? What are the different programs, the different tools you work with?
Thank you for the invitation. I think it's super exciting to be here. And let me just start by also sharing a bit of the journey that Novo Nordisk has been on. Because we, like many other companies, started with a focus on how can we be a responsible business. And that is what many people refer to today as CSR, corporate social responsibility. It has many names. But that is something that goes all the way back to the roots of the company, is to do business in a responsible way. And so what we've done there is to embed that into our bylaws. So we weren't born that way, but we have ensured that in the bylaws it says that we will do business in a way that is financially, environmentally, and socially responsible. So that's the basis. But like you said, sustainability is much more of a vision. It's about the destination, where we need to go. And these days we are in the midst of, I think, one of the most exciting transformations that you can imagine, namely how do we create a world in which people can thrive within the boundaries of the earth, and where business has taken center stage as one of the key actors in making that happen. So what we talk about at Novo Nordisk is how can we be a sustainable business, which is a business that delivers value to society, and by doing so also safeguards the company's future, delivers value to the business for our future. And the point here, I think that's important, is that it's fine to pursue ambitions to be a sustainable business, but it doesn't make sense to be a sustainable business if the world around you is unsustainable. So that is why you need to reach beyond your own boundaries and actually contribute to the health of society. And here I see that we have a shared mission and approach.
Absolutely. And I'd like to bring you in, Petra, as well. Following up on Susanne's point, it's interesting how you as a company, as a startup at EATGRIM, have contributed with a great product, but also how you have integrated sustainability in the core of your startup. Do you want to share with us how CSR, how sustainability sort of came about when you started EATGRIM?
Yes, actually we started in a little bit in a different way. So me and Caroline, when we studied together. We were both studying sustainable business together with entrepreneurship and innovation at CBS and Copenhagen Business School. And on one of the courses we actually had to study food waste. We chose that because we were really interested about food and how, not only from a culinary perspective, even though we both love eating as well, but it's also about how that touches every person's life. But when we were studying food waste, we went to visit some farms here in Sjælland and actually I still remember the first time I went to the backyard of one of the sheds and I saw this huge mountain of carrots and cabbages, and I was looking at that and asking, why is this laying here? And apparently it was not pretty enough for the supermarkets. It was either too small or it was too big or there were some damages on the skin. And I was just looking at the pile and thinking, I could eat this, so why couldn't the rest of us as well? And we went back home with some of the food and started to think, okay, well, there is a problem on the farm level. And also we did more secondary research and we found out that it's a huge global problem and number 3 emitter of CO2 and contributing to climate change as well that way. And there was a problem. The farmers also said that there are many people who try to solve this, but actually there has been lacking the connection to the consumer. And that was the missing link why it never actually got up. So the farmers said that good luck with it. We've seen this before, but if you can find a model that works, let's do it. And that was the challenge. We were two young consumers who wanted to live more sustainably, and we had been eating, trying to change our diets, but we were still missing that kind of click of how to actually do it. And the whole purpose of EATGRIM then was just to find the connection between the farmer and the consumer. And we thought, if we bring boxes of these ugly and surplus fruits and vegetables to people's doorstep, we make it so easy to the consumer that there's literally no excuse not to do it. So that's how GRIM came about. And so in that sense, actually, the whole core of the business is how can we bring the edible food to the market? That is still the very mission that we do. And how can we do it the best way, of course? And when you are a sustainable business, and when you, of course, the two of us, the founders, are very value-driven as people as well. But as you start building your company, you have to make sure that the rest of the team is aligned with that as well. That you don't only do sustainability on the product side, but all the way through the value chain that you create, starting from the transport from the farms, which, we don't have solutions to all of this. Of course, there's a lot to play, but what we're looking at is that it's about also green last mile delivery. How do we minimize waste in our processes as well? How do we make sure that we have sustainable products in our everyday use at the office as well? So it's really about bringing it to every single aspect of the organization. And also, when you are a sustainable business and when you use that label, you have to always be very transparent about that to your customers as well and the other stakeholders too.
So you're saying you started out really mapping the whole value chain. How can you make each part of that more sustainable? What has been the biggest challenge in that work when you look back?
And still is the fact that when you are a small company, you have to deal with sustainability as in terms of the green sustainability and environmental sustainability, and balance that with financial sustainability. And your resources are very tight, extremely tight when you just start from the ground. And we have been bootstrapped for a long time as well. So you really have to be creative with and resourceful how you use everything. And in that sense, you don't have all the resources to do all the marketing or all the education, or to get them always even for example, the most sustainable packaging, because all of these aspects are actually quite expensive. Oh, they are more expensive than the single-use plastics and so on. So it has been a struggle to balance that. And now we are coming to the level of and scale of our business where we can actually make these decisions and kind of through all the way.
And I just have to ask, you said you were bootstrapped. It's my understanding that it means you haven't taken in outside money or outside investment in the early parts of building your company.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in the first year, we were bootstrapped.
So you have been just living off the revenue you had from your company and your boxes, and that's it.
But that was until end of last year. Then, because we were on such a growth journey, then we also did equity crowdfunding as a way to get some outsider financing to really, exploit the potential that there is.
Yeah, great. And I also have to ask you, what has been the most rewarding in choosing to dedicate yourself to be a sustainable company?
I think the most rewarding is that you see the result every single day. You see the vegetables, you see the happy customers, and that every single box is actually transforming somebody's food habits and somebody's purchasing habits. So you have a very direct effect on the society in that way. But I think it's also still is the most rewarding fact that everything that I do and we do is actually contributing to this greater mission. Yeah. So every kilo saved or every kilo sold is every kilo saved. Mm-hmm. So we know that everything that we can do to bring the food to the market is a step forward into sustainability.
Every day, and that's a beautiful contribution.
Exactly.
I'm wondering, Susanne, when you hear about the hardships, the challenges of starting EATGRIM, if you take these hardships, which are, as I understand it, both on the investment side, but also the fact that it's just more expensive to produce this product, does that resonate with the broader challenges that companies around Denmark are facing when they engaged in more sustainable strategies?
Yeah, I think it's such an excellent example because it really meets all the definitions of what it takes to be a sustainable business. So you mentioned Copenhagen Business School, which is also where I have the opportunity to sometimes teach and inspire young students like you. And one of the definitions that I really like is that when you want to be a sustainable business, then it's a business that's built around a clear purpose. You're solving a problem, an identified problem, and you find the solution. And you do so, as you do so, you create benefits for society while avoiding doing any harm. And that, in fact, is a tall challenge. And I think that no company can claim that they are there yet. So I think that's important, but also to keep striving. And I was just smiling when I heard about your direct contact to your customers, because that is something that in a company like Novo Nordisk, where we are serving something like 30 million people with medicines, that we don't know them all. We don't see the benefits. We can see the benefits in clinical trial settings, but not in real life. So that direct satisfaction is one that I believe is very important. And at the other end, with your value chain, we have around 60,000 suppliers, and we are working with our supply chain to say, we have certain standards, we expect the same standards of you, because we would like that impact to trickle down in that ecosystem that we are part of. And then, of course, I have to say that regarding funding, where Novo Nordisk is today, obviously we are in a much more privileged position, but still we have to earn on a daily basis the continued support and confidence of shareholders, because otherwise they will walk away. So we have to demonstrate that we can deliver on what we set out to do. And so I think those three ingredients are important to any company.
Mm. And I want to stay a bit longer on the different challenges or perhaps obstacles that may be in the way for companies that want to see their business in more sustainable light. We saw some data from the EU Commission last year that came out in 2019 that showed that the 95 most polluting companies here in Denmark, their emission has actually grown with 17%. So in that respect, we're seeing a bit of a negative development. Why do you think we're seeing this? Because on the other hand, we're hearing how companies really want to be part of the sustainable transformation. How is this?
Well, I think the word transformation is important here, because like many other companies, Novo Nordisk has also for many years followed an approach where we attempted to decouple our impacts. So as we were growing, as we were significantly, we wanted to emit less carbon, for instance. And for a while, we actually managed to show that we had, the curves were going in each their direction. But that is just not enough, because like you say, we need to go to zero, or actually we need to have not even regenerative, but generative practices, because the resources of the earth are too scarce for us to continue just using away. So that is why it's a change of paradigm from minimizing to zero, or even positive. In Novo Nordisk, we have an ambition that that sets a course whereby in 2030 we want to have 0 carbon emissions from our own activities and transportation. And that is actually a tall challenge for us, given our footprint. But it's necessary. And I think it's also important to keep reminding ourselves of those statistics that you cite, because we like to think here in Denmark that we can pride ourselves of all the things we do so well, whereas sometimes we can be exporting our environmental footprint to other parts of the world, but it's still there. So understanding that system that we are part of and then trying to influence that in a positive way is incredibly important, which is why also we are now encouraging our entire supply chain to also make the shift to renewable energy. Mm-hmm. And here I think what we can do with with impact is to show the way, to be an example, because we have proven over 5 years that we could make that transition. And so we think it's fair to give our suppliers 10 years to get to the same place, and to be able to demonstrate that it's actually good business in the same goal.
You said you had a strategy to become CO2 neutral by 2030. Did I hear that correct? What are the key steps you're taking and to make that real?
Well, we have 3 steps actually, and I think the first one is we call it circular company. So that's about how do we ensure that what we do in the company leaves no negative footprint on the environment. So that's the company itself, our activities. The second one is the supply chain, as I mentioned. And then, of course, the third one is equally important, namely, how can we develop circular products? Mm-hmm. So currently, the medicines that we make that are beneficial to the patients come at if you will, a cost to the environment, because they are delivered in devices that are made of plastics. And that is not a sustainable solution. It's the best, or it has been the best possible, but that shouldn't leave us satisfied. So we are now looking at how can we use different materials, how can we think about a circular delivery where it can also be considering take back, for instance. Mm-hmm. And again, I have to say ecosystem is the key, because we can only do so much on our own. We need to collaborate with all the parties in the supply chain through to the user, the patients who need the products. Yeah. So those are the 3 priorities we have. It's not easy, but we have a lot of people in the company working to think about how can we innovate in early product design, in delivery, in distribution, in all of the parts of the chain. And the human imagination is amazing. So if you give yourself, and I love your analogy also, if you give yourself some constraints, then you will actually see that imagination will, flourish. So
in a way, you're perhaps mimicking the startup scenario of having not so many resources and for that to be a leadway into creativity. Petra, when you listen to Susanne talking about how they dedicate resources and colleagues to innovate and become creative around their sustainability strategies, and you sit here as a small company, a startup that are still struggling, what does that make you think about how you can go about the creativity and the imagination in your product development?
Yeah, well, first of all, it kind of sounds like it doesn't matter what scale you do sustainability, the core problems are still often the same. And for example, just to kind of tap into that, what you said also, that also sustainability is about creating impact in a scale, right? And how do you reach that? And that is the balance of sustainable solutions that then can actually scale to a level where it can impact a lot of people's lives. And that is kind of the core struggle that, for example, us as a growing startup are going through as well, and seems like that won't go away either as well. What startups do have is a lot of creativity and I guess freedom as well. You know, I can decide something now and it can be implemented by tonight. We don't have such a big risk in terms of we don't have to report directly to anybody right now. Eventually will, but just that is kind of the resource we have. And how to use that in the best way is then like what startups can do, but what many startups also use as the competitive advantage. And I think that's why also I think it was a blessing for us, me and Karo, that we did not come from the food industry, for example, because we did not understand. Basically, that farmers were telling us that this is too difficult. It's not going to succeed. We have seen this before, but because we didn't know that, we just went for it and thought, but of course it can be solved. And that's kind of the crazy, I guess, enthusiasm and energy that you were also talking about that is needed to actually create out-of-the-box solutions. And that's kind of the beauty of the struggle that we have. And in that sense, there is a lot to do as well. What is exciting about working in sustainability that there are so many options and so many things to tackle. I guess that's more turning the negative into positive in that way, but there is a lot of creativity that can be implemented as well in how do we solve these problems that seem so sometimes even too big to grasp, but actually when you start breaking it down into smaller ones, there is a lot we can do as startups and corporates and big companies.
And I think if I may just pick up, because I think it's super important what you're saying, Petra, that companies the size of Novo Nordisk can learn so much from companies like yours, because you can become too big to fail. And one of the things that we are focusing on is how can we encourage in our own culture that's willingness to take risks and to fail, but to fail fast. Because if it takes you a long time to fail and you've got a big engine, then you also drown a lot of costs. But if you don't take risks, then you miss opportunities. So that autonomy that you have as a small company is one that many companies will envy you, because they have to be held accountable to their shareholders, to their annual general meeting, to investors like Novo Nordisk does. And for that, it's important to always be able to make the business case. But the business case can be articulated in so many ways. One can be revenues and the certainty of continued revenue streams, but another one can be some of that added value that you create that may not be counted in money, but counted in quality of life, in health for the people whom you serve, etc. And I think that's what you bring is new ways of measuring what success would look like. So we need that, richness of innovative approaches to keep going.
And I think startups and the startup scene in general needs then the confirmation, for example, from the bigger players that these are important metrics to look at. Because, it's still, I think there is still a bit of a struggle for, like you said, you have to make the business case and then to also show that it is important, but that it also, it can create a big impact if we just, get on board with that. And there is a lot of talk about sustainable investment, for example, but still there is big risk aversion because we think that it can't be profitable.
And why do you think that is? Is that because of insecurities around whether or not this product would actually, fit the market, or how?
Yeah, there can be different things. I think it's a lot about the narrative behind it, like you said as well. But also perhaps because it's still in the phase where it has to be proven as a business case, that from, for example, what I've heard from some investors is that maybe they are even more risk averse because they have even bigger of a job to prove that this is a good case. So sometimes they then in sustainability cases, they go for the very certain ones that they know that will be easiest to scale. I've heard something like that.
I wanted to ask you if that's what you see as well, Susanne.
Yeah, it is. So
it takes extra, more narrative, more proof.
I've had the privilege of working for nearly 20 years in that space of engaging with investors, with so-called ESG investors. Initially, that was a niche activity, and we were responding to certain small investors that had very specific interest, very specific questions. But the whole investor model is built around how do you avoid risk, right? So they would look to you and see what are the risks that your business is taken over, or you cannot grow it, or whatever. So it's all about discounting. Whereas what I would like to encourage is for investors that have a different perspective to look for companies, to handpick companies that can create what in the investment world is called alpha value, where you outperform. And the thing is that you can outperform on different metrics than your revenues, but that will translate into your revenues eventually. And those investors who understand how to handpick those growth companies, they are the ones who can prove that they outperform their peers in returns on their investment.
Time flies when you are in a good company. But before we let you go, we have a signature question here tomorrow that I want to ask you guys as well. And it's really a bit of advice for our viewers and listeners. And the question is, if you should give or encourage us to do one thing tomorrow to become part of the sustainable transformation, what would that one thing be? Maybe we should start with you, Susanne.
I think I would say take inspiration from what I say and from what Petra does.
Yeah. So some talk and then some action with Petra. It's an easy pickup from here, I would say. But what would your suggestion be?
Yeah, that's really well put. I think that's I would of course agree with that as well. Food has an impact on everybody's life. That's always the angle that I come from. So take those little steps in that, and perhaps ugly and service vegetables can help you make your lives more sustainable.
Absolutely. What a beautiful collective advice that we pass on. So thank you so much for joining us, both of you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. And thank you so much for listening in. If you like this conversation, you can find it online along with the other generational talks, and it's on tomorrow.today. Thank you.